Hey everyone, welcome to Sociastrology. Today we're going to take Neptune and Aries through the houses to see how this is going to be impacting you more personally. And before we dive into it, I do just want to let you all know that we are starting a new Chart Your Destiny giveaway now. And so if you would like to be entered to win a free personal reading with me, all you have to do is make sure that you are subscribed, give the video a like, and then comment below with where you're from. If you want to be a bit vague, I would say that Earth is specific enough to enter. But yeah, if you want to share your city, I would love to know where everyone is from. So yeah, if you do that, then you will be entered to win a free personal reading with me, and I will announce the winner for this round on May 1st. So we'll go ahead and read through this, and then we'll get into it sign by sign. So yeah, Neptune in Aries brings a cultural and personal landscape defined by bold individualism, defiance, and extremes. People maybe feel drawn to narratives of self reliance, power, and pushing limits, whether through physical endurance, technological innovation, or ideological intensity. There's an emphasis on confrontation, control, and self aggrandizement, often manifesting in social movements or rule breaking behavior. Identity also becomes a major battleground with themes of supremacy, self deification, and rebellion shaping personal and collective belief systems. Expect a rise in extreme ideologies, militant individualism, and a live fast ethos that challenges authority, morality, and traditional structures. Now, also, a lot of what we'll be dealing with on a personal level will have these Aryan themes because these are going to be present in the houses that we'll be going through naturally. But ultimately, what we're going to be dealing with is Neptune, generally speaking, impacting certain areas of our life. And so the way that I find impacts us is that it introduces us to a new path. It's Neptune is for us personally the journey of life. It is a matter of what is yet to manifest, but that which we are being magnetized and pulled toward. It can feel often like a wandering path, and that can feel at times a little bit maddening, but it's ultimately once you get all the way through a Neptune transit, and hopefully if you look back on the years from 2011 and you look at the part of your life in which Neptune has been going in terms of the house that it's been going through, hopefully you can see that nonetheless that process, though it's been wandering, though there's been ups and downs and ebbs and flows along the way, that it's been a bit of a beautiful process to cause that area of your life to kind of bloom in directions in which you may not have otherwise expected or may not have otherwise pushed for. So Neptune introduces the dream, the vision, the wish of a certain area of your life. And so you can, like I said, feel drawn down paths toward a specific wish that you are kind of casting outward. And especially with regard to growth and realignment of your life with regard to that area of your life, that house that it's in. Additionally, it can feel like you don't have all of the answers, and yet this area of your life is emphasized. And I would say definitely just go with it to the extent that you possibly can to navigate by intuition, by faith, that you're going to have so many more answers along these lines as you go. So, with all of that said, let's go ahead and look at the dates of relevance for us here, and then we'll go ahead and take it through the signs. So, we have this first ingress into Aries for Neptune is starting on the 30th of March of 2025, and that's going to continue through the 22nd of October of this year. It will then be retrograding back into Pisces until January 26th of 2026. And then that is going to stick around for a very long time, as you can see, all the way until the 22nd of May of 2038. So we're dealing with about 14 years of Neptune in Aries. That's what I'm saying. It's going to be a long process through which you're going to be drawn down some interesting wandering paths. But the more that you can know ahead of time that this is occurring, the easier it's going to be for you to kind of find your way along those lines. We will get this dipping then back from May until October. That will dip actually into Taurus, and then it'll come back into Aries for a little while from the 21st of October of 2038 through the 24th of March of 2039. Then it will be permanently into Taurus. So, with all of that said, let's go ahead and take this through the signs, starting with Aries. I also want to clarify that this is primarily for your rising sign. If you want to check out your sun sign as well, that is perfectly fine. But I wouldn't necessarily recommend taking this as your moon sign or down the line, just because it's going to muddy up the message. And Neptune will already muddy things up enough as it is. So I would focus most strongly on your rising sign and then to a somewhat lesser extent your sun, and then probably not stress too much beyond that about it. So, with that said, let's dive into Aries rising. So, for Aries rising, Neptune in your first house is going to cause this new path, this new wandering path that you are being drawn through and that you're being magnetized in different directions around your personal identity and who it is that you are, who it is that you want to present yourself as out in the world, and who it is really that you want to align your own personal self with. So there's going to be a lot of a a pull to manifest new aspects of yourself, new dimensions of yourself, to develop yourself more along the lines of a specific dream or wish or vision that you have for who it is that you are in your life. And that's what Neptune is going to be trying to introduce you to. It's not necessarily going to do this straightforwardly with physical manifest evidence, but it's going to be an intuitive pull. So the changes that you feel like you are being drawn to make in these coming years, I would really follow that. And I would definitely emphasize personal spiritual growth in this period of time, because that's likely to be the area in which this will come to fruition and will blossom the most in. So aligning yourself along those lines should help pretty strongly with getting the message, so to say, a lot sooner than you necessarily would from Neptune by not leading in that way. So, yeah, you won't necessarily have all of the answers. There may be a little bit of confusion around your identity and who it is that you want to be. You may be feeling that there's a sense of identity that you've carried with you for a while that feels like it's dissolving or kind of coming apart in certain ways. And that is in order to bring you more into alignment with something else that is, again, trying to bloom in the future for you. So again, navigating by faith and intuition is really important here. And yeah, just to go through some of these points also that I've written here, Neptune in your first house is deeply personal transit. So this is going to be quite significant for you. It's probably going to be something that you feel very strongly in these coming years. Often we can overlook these things when they're working on other areas of our life, not necessarily to our benefit, because we do want to be aware of this that's going on, but it'll be a little bit difficult for you to even overlook this. So it's going to affect how you see yourself, how others perceive you, and yeah, feeling a pull toward reinventing yourself, exploring spiritual or creative paths, and again, like I said, dissolving old identities that no longer serve you. This can for sure bring a ton of inspiration and hand it directly to you. I tend to look at transits as things that are kind of put into your hands during a given period of time. And to have Neptune there in your hands is very, very deeply inspiring. It can, though, also have confusion handed directly to you around these things. So blurring the lines between reality and illusion, but looking at illusion not as something that is somehow a like a mesmerism or something like that. It's not necessarily something that isn't by definition real. It's just not yet real. So what is really going on for you versus the vision that you feel kind of creeping up within your spirit throughout this period of time. And that is what's trying to come through for the future. That is that vision that you're trying to bring into fruition. So potentially struggling with self-doubt or a lack of direction. But if you feel that self-doubt creeping up, and for other reasons that may be especially pronounced in the first few years of this transit for you, because we'll also be dealing with Saturn in Aries during these years, and I'll be addressing that shortly in a coming video. But try not to let that take root too much. Try not to let that dispirit you, because that's not ultimately the purpose of Neptune here. And that self-doubt is likely due to the fact that you just don't have all of the answers. But just because you don't have all of the answers doesn't mean you don't have any of the answers. So try to work with what you do really know, and especially when what it is that you know is deeply rooted like in your spirit. It's something that you can feel is true. Something that feels really right is basically the guideposts that you should be following throughout this time, especially if you have any self-doubt creeping up through these coming years. So yeah, also an opportunity to connect with your higher self and embrace a more compassionate, intuitive version of yourself, and do definitely be cautious of self-deception and unrealistic expectations about who you are and what you can achieve. So try to maintain that balance, but always try and check it against how is it that you are, sorry, I keep going too high. How is it that you're really feeling about what it is that you're pursuing? Because those feelings are what's going to be that guiding light for you. Neptune dwells in our sentiments, in our feelings, in this kind of these abstract notions that we pick up on from the collective unconscious and that we kind of realize through our own actions. And so by tapping into that, those are the guideposts that you're supposed to be following. So that's part of what's a little frustrating about Neptune, is that it is so abstract, and you can easily gaslight yourself out of not following it because there isn't necessarily any tangible evidence. So that's something that you're going to be confronting in the coming 14 years or so, on and off. You'll learn to work with the ropes over the years here, but the more that you can kind of take hold of that and embrace your own personal intuition as a compass in the beginning, the less frustrating that this start of this phase for you is going to be feeling. So yeah, that is what I have for you, Aries rising. I hope it is a beautiful time. It's a very special transit for you to be dealing with. So I hope it's wonderful for you. And thank you for being here. So for Taurus rising, we have Neptune is in your 12th house, and that is bringing up questions about the kind of path or journey of life that you are taking along a kind of subconscious or spiritual level. This can be pulling you toward like meditative or alternative healing or creative, artistic, emotionally expressive paths as well. That's something that Neptune can be bringing up within your 12th house throughout this time. But ultimately, these are questions about what is yet to manifest. And you may find that you are somehow tapped into this more. Having Neptune in that 12th house is really going to supercharge your intuition. So I would really be following that. It's also going to tap your creativity into a deeper yet more liminal place of yourself, that part of yourself that is tuned into the collective unconscious. That's what Neptune basically works through, is that collective unconscious. And so being able to tap into that, for instance, if you were a creative type, can give you a lot of power to be able to speak to things that not only are you feeling truly and authentically, but others are also feeling and they may not be able to articulate or express in the way that you are. So it can enable you to tap into that in these coming years. This also introduces something of a wish or a dream, a hope or a vision of the future for you, but this is working through the subconscious. And so it's something that you'll feel creeping up on you. It's going to be very subtle. And so when you get these weird little inclinations of what if I were to look into this? What if I were to start to do this? I would really listen to that and I would try and play with it with your consciousness. So write these things down, look at them, try to engage with them, try to think about them, and then see how it is that you feel about that. And then potentially, um, for sure, go into those directions because it's going to be subtle, but I think that you can work that up and out in a really beautiful way. And yeah, this is definitely going to be drawing you down certain paths again, subconsciously. There's going to be little nudges that you feel. And so in order to embrace the kind of growth and realignment that this is trying to set up for you in these coming years, you're really going to need to tap into that on a personal, on a subconscious level. Taking time by yourself, I think, is also going to be really fruitful for you. The 12th is also the place of isolation. It's when we step back from the world and go within, when we are writing up our thoughts, when we are in quiet contemplation, that is where a lot of the 12th house functions for us. And so that's going to be a place that is infused with Neptune around this time. And Neptune can tap you into visions of the future that you might not otherwise have had that can be extraordinarily, weirdly prescient and extraordinarily beneficial as well. So I would definitely be taking time out in these coming years to write down your hopes and then look at them, see how it is that they hit you. And there may be things that you write down that you then kind of, when you're looking at it, you're feeling like, oh, I'm not so sure. That can definitely also be Neptune kind of directing you of maybe not so much, maybe try something else. So yeah, you're going to be feeling like you deeply don't have all of the answers. You may find that there's almost a sense of like pilgrimage or a spiritual journey that you're going through to try to find answers for yourself, to try and find a spiritual compass that you can go ahead and follow throughout the future, even beyond just the 14 years that we'll have Neptune in Aries in your 12th house. So learning the ropes of more and more and more, navigating by intuition, navigating by faith, I think is going to be something that is highly available to you. Because again, when you go into those places, Neptune's there for you. That's where it's communicating with you. And so you can then develop practices around that, especially in the first few years when you also have Saturn there. And I'll talk about that more in a future video, but to be able to kind of establish a routine of working through subconscious material in your alone time and being able to structure that in a way that is actually extraordinarily productive for you going forward. So yeah, with all of that said, let's go through some of this that I've also written down. So, Neptune in your 12th house activates your inner world, bringing heightened intuition, vivid dreams. Definitely be paying attention to the dreams. That is the subconscious kind of uh, speaking to you, creating a little movie for you to watch about the things that are going on, in that world, as well as a deep connection to the spiritual realm. Maybe you may feel drawn to meditation, retreats, or charitable work. This is another thing is you may feel especially compassionate throughout this time, and getting involved in charitable work is a really excellent way to channel this energy effectively too. This transit encourages you to release old patterns, connect with something greater than yourself. And by releasing old patterns, I mean like old conditioning, the way you have habitually and without necessarily consciously thinking about it, learned to function. And with Neptune here, you can definitely rewire that. Again, especially in those first few years when you also have Saturn here, complicating things a little bit more for sure, but it's giving you a little bit more of something tangible to grab onto that you can then run with in the abstract way that Neptune will on its own, after Saturn moves on in 2028 out of this place as well. So in the 12th house is also associated hidden enemies, self-undoing, and escapism. So definitely do be mindful of avoiding reality through addictive behaviors or unhealthy coping mechanisms. I won't say that much more than I just have, but that can definitely be a thing, and it'll be something that you'll want to watch out for. So this is a time for healing and surrendering to the flow of life, but it is important to stay grounded and seek clarity when needed. And you're going to find a lot of that clarity, like I said, internally through looking at what is being worked up out of the subconscious into your consciousness. And then by looking at that and just engaging with it in a conscious way, being able to relate that back to your intuition, your feelings, your instinct based on how is that making you feel? And then being able to make the connection between your conscious mind and what you know is a thing, and then your feelings about it, your intuition kind of in the background, and be able to kind of play with those more. Having Neptune in your 12th house is going to teach you very, very well how to utilize this. So, yeah, I think that is pretty much what I have for you, Taurus rising. So, for Gemini rising, Neptune is going to be working through your 11th house. And so, this introduces a new kind of path or journey through the realm of one, hopes and dreams and aspirations of yours, but also the people that you are dealing with as friends or colleagues or allies. So the groups that you belong to, your friendships, those with whom you identify throughout this time, even on a broader social level, like those identity groups that you feel that you belong to. So there's going to be a new path with regard to other people that you are engaging with, as well as new hopes and dreams arising in a very kind of subtle and intuitive way for you. So what's really nice is that Neptune tends to bring up what is yet to manifest in reality. And this is tapping you into that in the sense of this being your house of your hopes and dreams. This is tapping you into that in an intuitive way where you're kind of even getting a preview of what it is that you're going to want to be hoping for. And weirdly enough, this can align you with that ahead of time so that you're already on course for that by the time that kind of reaches your consciousness there. So this also brings up matters of like dreams, hopes, visions for yourself and for your future and what it is that you're wanting to create in your life. And so for this to be taking place in your 11th house is very weirdly auspicious. I'm going to keep saying it's going to be weird because it's beautiful and yet it's not tangible, you know? So you have to make it tangible. You have to run with what it's offering to you, but it's giving you these really brilliant visions of what could be. It's giving you these really brilliant visions of what you could be extraordinarily good at and what you should go after throughout this period of time, who it is that you should be connecting to toward those ends as well. And so you can feel drawn down paths that lead to growth, that lead to realignment with regard to especially your social life. So, like I said, friends, allies, colleagues, social networks, professional networks, even charitable groups and institutions that you belong to. This can also then have you possibly even drawn toward relating with people who are nowhere near you. So this, for instance, if there is a significant move that is slated for you and maybe you're not aware of it, like 5 years down the line, this can have you then in interesting ways connecting with that culture ahead of time so that you're a little bit better prepared to be making those changes as the time comes for that. So it's potentially a wish, a dream, a vision that you don't yet know that you should have, that it's starting to lead you toward already. So it should be playing with timelines in really interesting ways and aligning you in just an extraordinarily stunning way. Also, this can, though, have you feeling like you don't have all of the answers probably until the end of this transit, which is to say the late 2030s. It probably won't be until then that you really fully recognize what all this has been about. But fortunately, by the end of a transit like this, often we can recognize, okay, that was actually even better than I could have led myself by being led by Neptune, by being led or guided by faith and intuition and having your hand forced to an extent in that way, because Neptune is going to leave little breadcrumbs. It's going to lead you in these different ways to I often call them side quests of feeling like you're being led in a certain direction, but really it was just to pick up a certain skill or to pick up a certain friend or to pick up a certain piece of information that's actually going to serve you in a much broader way, in a much more collective, or what's the word that I'm looking for? A much broader vision for yourself that is further than down the road. So that's what can be a little bit maddening about it is the fact that it will pull you on side quests here and there, and you'll think, oh, well, I guess I'm going in this direction, and it's like, no, not quite. You're just collecting something to build a bigger picture here. So let's go through a bit of what I have written here. So yeah, Neptune in your 11th house brings a dreamy, idealistic energy to your social life and long-term goals. This can also have you, I didn't quite mention this, but connecting with more idealistic, spiritual people too. So I would not at all be surprised if that's something that you wind up encountering as well in the coming years. So you may feel inspired to connect with like-minded individuals who share your spiritual or creative vision, even your social vision. Like this can even go pretty political or institutional or cultural. You might become involved in humanitarian or artistic causes. However, Neptune can also blur boundaries in friendships, leading to confusion or misplaced trust. So that is something that you'll want to keep a bit of an eye on. Do definitely trust your instincts and your intuition when it comes to other people with Neptune here, because sometimes it can teach you certain lessons about things that you might not want to deal with by leaving you a little bit open to it so that you encounter that and recognize, okay, that's a boundary that I may need to create in the future. So usually it's not just going to like throw you to the dogs or anything like that, but it can be a bit of like, hey, watch out for this, watch out for that, don't get sucked into this. So really tapping into, again, intuition when it comes to other people. Also, do be cautious of idealizing people or groups. This is something that I think is going to be relevant to a lot of people in the coming time. You will probably be tapped into this a little bit more, but there's also a little bit more of a risk for you along these lines too, which is that it can feel like, oh, this cause is the most important thing to me, and this group of people are addressing it, and it's absolutely wonderful, and this person and that person are leading this group, so they must be these wonderful people that, should be basically idolized or looked up to. And one thing that I will highly recommend, based on my own experiences in life repeatedly, is don't have idols, don't have heroes. And should you run into a situation in which you have idols or heroes, don't meet them. Because when you put people on a pedestal, for one thing, the kind of people who seek out pedestals tend to not be the nicest or greatest of people as it is. But also, when you put someone on a pedestal, there's nothing they can do but disappoint you. So, as I say here, this can lead to disappointment if you do wind up overly idealizing groups or people. This transit encourages you to align your aspirations with your spiritual values, but it's important to stay realistic about your goals and the people that you surround yourself with. So, yeah, no gaslighting yourself when it comes to your values or your visions or your goals, and especially not when it comes to people, and particularly not when it comes to groups of people. So, trust your gut, trust your faith, trust your intuition to lead you along these lines, and that's going to lead you to the best result. However, I do have to say, this is a wonderful transit. This is a wonderful house. It tends to deal with very like, quote unquote, high vibrational topics, and it tends to be a really just stunningly beautiful planet to be led by through this kind of path of your social impact and the impact of society upon you, the impact of your dreams, realizing goals and visions for yourself, and synchronizing with you opportunities. That's one thing that I would never recommend underestimating from Neptune is its ability to affect synchronicities. So when you need someone in your life, them showing up. And when you need a certain vision, that information coming to you through some sort of means. So the only thing I would caution, more than anything, idealizing people. None of your visions and none of your path will ever wholly belong to anyone else. And there will never be one specific other person in the world that you should base your plans for your life and your visions for your life upon. There's never just one person. So never put someone in that position because that gets pretty dangerous. So, and disappointing, and even worse than any of that, disillusioning. So just make sure that your values, your ideals, your hope, your vision is what is leading you. And that most likely will wind up leading you toward those really beautiful, wonderful contacts that you're going to be having that should be equalized. So, yeah, that is, I think, what I have for you, Gemini Rising. I hope it is an absolutely beautiful time. And thank you so much for being here. So, for Cancer Rising, we have Neptune in your 10th house, and this is leading you on a kind of path or personal journey with regard to your reputation, your legacy, your career. Um, it doesn't just have to be your career, but for most people, this house does play out that way. This has to do with your public image and what it is that you feel like you're here to do in your life and what it is that you are capable of accomplishing in your life. And so this brings up questions of what is quite yet to manifest for you. So you can feel pulled and pushed and drawn and magnetized in different kinds of directions that may wind up surprising you in certain ways. You may feel for sure just literally drawn toward a spiritual path in life, whether that be in your working life or in your broader life direction. But ultimately, you are being drawn spiritually in different directions with regard to your career and your accomplishments. So you can feel quite amped in terms of your ambitions and feel this internal urge of there's something I'm supposed to be doing. There's something I'm supposed to be creating. There's some way that I'm supposed to be impacting the world. And I want to see that through. And so follow your intuition and your own personal internal compass, your instincts along that path. One thing I will say that can definitely be the case is that Neptune can bring us in directions through leaving breadcrumbs for us in different directions. And one of the ways that I like to refer to this is that Neptune likes to bring us on side quests. And if you play games, a side quest tends to be so that you can collect an item or connect with another character, so to say, another person or another energy or another idea or a whole other field that we might not have otherwise connected with. That is, when we're being drawn in that direction, it looks like, okay, this is the trajectory, this is the way that I'm going. This is why I think it's really important that you definitely listen to your intuition and your instincts, because you can feel like, okay, this is what I'm going to be doing. And yet you can feel internally a little bit like, is it though? And you can convince yourself, well, all of the evidence is pointing in this direction because this is where I'm being led. But really listen to that internal compass, and you should be able to figure out what's the side quest versus what is the actual goal here. And what's nice about that being, drawn off the broader path here and there. Again, you're collecting things that are ultimately going to serve to make your position, the way that you are able to impact the world, to make your legacy especially unique and especially effective, because you are bringing in these different ways of doing things. So, for instance, for someone who winds up going into counseling, they may start out studying history and they may think, okay, I'm studying history, I'm going to be a historian. And then they may be drawn toward music or something along those lines, like music theory. And they can feel like, okay, well, I guess I was led toward history because I needed to somehow understand how history had an impact on culture, which had an impact on music. And then you wind up settling on or being ultimately drawn to counseling and recognize that it was actually all of this. It was through resonance and dissonance and an understanding of music theory that you're able to understand, like, somehow internal harmony or something along these lines, and therefore build a theory of counseling, a theory of psychology that's almost unique to you based upon that theory, but then also informed by history and how our place in the world and our culture and even like human instincts and maybe how they've outserved some of their purpose in terms of like being in fight or flight mode too much or whatever. And all of this could then inform your counseling in such a way that you're able to have an impact and an effect on people, which is much more holistic than it would have been if you had known from the start, I'm going to wind up doing counseling and just going straight toward that. You wouldn't have necessarily the historical background or the background of this kind of theory of harmony and disharmony that might be then, informing your practice later on. So that is something that I find really beautiful and weird about Neptune and how it leads. And it's something I would definitely not discount. Not every side quest is the way that you're going to be going, but don't resist them because they invariably have very, very valuable pieces of the puzzle that you're going to need to be able to connect in later to this broader vision of what you are creating as a legacy in your life. So yeah, feeling drawn down certain paths for the sake of growth and realignment. And Neptune also brings up matters of a dream or a vision, a wish or a hope. And that does serve the 10th house quite well because that's ultimately what we're doing. It's a question of what is it that we really want? What is our long-term, when we're on our deathbed, what is it that we want to look back and see as what it is that we've done with our life? And this is an area in which Neptune can do really wonderful work to create that big vision for us. And of course, it's never too late to contribute to broaden your horizons of what it is that you feel like your reputation and your legacy is. So even if you're retired This is leading you in interesting new paths of contributing even more and more and more to that sense of fulfillment in your legacy, creatively, socially, however it is, even if it is ultimately, in a sense, a new and different career that you're doing post retirement, an impact that you're having on your community, anything like that. So, one thing with this is that until you get toward the end of a transit with Neptune, you're almost guaranteed to not have all the answers. So, of course, we never have all the answers, but like I said, it's going to be pulling you in this direction and that. Follow the tide, follow the ebb and the flow, follow the what is it called? The undertow and the tide. So feel free to follow that. Try not to be too rigid with yourself. This isn't going to fit nicely and neatly into the kind of career path trajectories that, say, a career counselor would have given you in high school or something like that. This isn't straightforward, but it's all the more beautiful for being all the more holistic then, by following Neptune in this area. So yeah, you won't necessarily have all of the answers, but definitely with Neptune, the way to tap into it is through the subconscious, through your intuition, through faith. When there's an ebb, when you get that redirect, when you realize, okay, well, that was a side quest, that can feel akin, because of the way that our culture is, that can feel akin to a failure. And don't feel that way, because that's not remotely what it is. You're just getting then redirected again. It's just that we get so rigid about this area of our life in the 10th house, that it's going to be really important to remain in faith and to know that it's actually wonderful, those ebbs. It's wonderful when you realize, no, this isn't the path for me. It's still something you love. You might not just want to do it as the thing that you do. You want to do more. That's what Neptune's saying here. So try and keep in mind that that is a beautiful thing, and that is ultimately, that is living life. That's living life to the fullest by following those tides, So yeah, let's go through what I've written here. Just this is to back me up, to make sure that I don't forget something that I wanted to mention. So yeah, Neptune in your 10th house can bring confusion or uncertainty about your career path and public image. You may feel drawn to a more compassionate, creative, or spiritually aligned profession, but there's also a risk of disillusionment or unclear goals. This transit can dissolve old structures in your career, leaving you unsure of your direction, but it also opens the door to new possibilities, I will say, broader, more holistic, more stunning in their kind of intricacy, possibilities that align you with your soul's purpose. So be cautious of making impulsive career decisions or becoming overly idealistic about your professional life, and focus on integrating your spiritual values with your work. I want to come back to this second to last sentence. The impulsive career decisions thing, that's the side quest. That is assuming that things are rigid, assuming that that's the direction. There can be a way for you to be very aware of the fact that something isn't ultimately the goal, but still very beneficial. I truly believe that Neptune behaves in the way that we like to think that benefic planets do, like Venus and Jupiter. I mean, to go a little bit more modern than I typically would, to me, it's kind of no wonder that Neptune is associated with the sign that is ruled by Jupiter and exalts Venus. It's a beautiful planet. It's just that because it doesn't offer us tangible stuff and we live in the society that we live in, it can feel a little frustrating along those lines. So when it comes to impulsive decisions, this would be like, say you were already studying counseling, and you were like, okay, I'm going all in on history. Okay, I'm going all in on music theory. And ultimately, then you wind up taking on a lot more. Say, if you were in college, you would wind up through that probably taking on more debt than you needed to because your core curriculum would be adjusting a little bit every time you made that change because you might be going from a college of sciences to a college of humanities to a college of arts, and the core curriculum then even changes, and it's like that wasn't even what it was about anyway. So do try and give things time to work through, and do keep in mind that you don't need to go all in on everything for it to be useful to you and for you to become, even in a sense, especially in a kind of abstract or spiritual sense, pretty expert in it, you know? So, yeah, also becoming overly idealistic about your professional life. That's again that all in kind of a thing. So that can keep you a little bit more, grounded, and that can be helpful. I do have to say, I'm going to be covering this more in a video that's going to be coming up, but for the first few years of this, you're going to be dealing not only with Neptune, but also with Saturn in this 10th house of yours until about 2028, starting very shortly. So the two of them together is pretty extra. It's a lot. It is a little bit contradictory. So I will say right now, and then I'll address it more in a video where I specifically take Saturn and Neptune through all of the houses. I'll say right now that go easy on yourself. There's going to be weird questions arising around rigidity and around the specificity of your goals for sure from now through 2028. So try to remain as open as you possibly can. And yeah, very shortly we'll be discussing the combination of them and the extra intricacies that you're going to be dealing with for a few years here when it comes to your career, reputation, legacy, public standing, and so forth. So yeah, I think that that's pretty much what I have for you, Cancer Rising. So I hope that it is a beautiful time for you. I personally have Gemini Rising, so I have just been through this transit, and it has convinced me through this time and through past times that Neptune is a benefic. So I hope that it convinces you of the same through the process. And yeah, thank you so much for being here. So for Leo rising, Neptune is going to be in your ninth house. And so this is really quite beautiful. It is likely that you're going to be becoming a lot more spiritual in the coming years. So the ninth house tends to be akin to the path of growth through life, the point of intense personal growth where we take in these kind of expanded horizons of other people's perspectives, other cultures, other places, other ways of looking at things, um, other religious or spiritual traditions and their ideas, and kind of amalgamating that into something that we feel very aligned with. It is the point of us gaining our footing continually throughout our life about what is aligned with us. And so to have Neptune here is really very beautiful. It will feel a bit like, pardon, it will feel a bit like a wandering path, but that is ultimately what the ninth house is meant to be anyway, the place of pilgrimage. And Neptune is kind of a planet of pilgrimage. So you may really resonate with that kind of a sense of what it is that you're doing with your life in these coming 14 years or so. But Neptune also has to do with what is yet to manifest in your life. And so, what's interesting about it being in the ninth house is that the ninth house does have, it's the house before or after, depending on your perspective, the 10th house. And it does develop into that. It is the value base, the belief base. It is the place in the world in which you occupy, which feeds into your legacy and what it is that you are capable of manifesting in the world. So again, we have these repeated kind of themes of what is yet to manifest. What is it that you're after? What is it that you would like to see? Dream big with Neptune in your ninth. Believe me, like go big with it. And so This also introduces to you a new kind of dream or vision or wish in your life. And this is likely to be humane in the sense of having to do with humanity, as well as, again, expanding your horizons and spirituality and your sense of connection to spirit. Also, your sense of spirit in this in the sense of feeling excited, feeling exuberant. What is it that interests you? What is it that pulls you that you really want to study and get deeply, deeply into? Neptune in the ninth is going to be helping you along those lines to further develop in those directions. So you're very likely to feel that you are being drawn down various paths for the sense for the purpose of I'm just never going to stop saying sense to you for the purpose of personal growth and realignment. And what it's ultimately realigning you to is your values. This is the house of not so much the legacy as it were. This is what underpins that. This is your beliefs. This is your sense of the world, your belief system. This is um, that which fuels you, that which is the basis upon which you build the foundation of your legacy. And so it's working on this more abstract level of your knowledge, your understanding, and your belief about the world and your place in it, and your belief about your ability to impact the world as well. And so going pretty big on that, I would personally advise, but there can be an extraordinary level of exuberance and idealism and optimism in this area. And that can put you into certain positions that can lead you to disillusionment either sooner or later. But that's life. So, we can't all be perfect all the time. And that's how we learn lessons. So I would just go with a lot of the exuberance that it offers you. Try to keep it in reason when you know you're going a little bit overboard. But yeah, ultimately, what this brings up is some conscious awareness that you don't have all of the answers. And of course, we never have all of the answers on anything, but it brings to your attention that you don't have all of the answers of what you believe. And so it can lead you to deeply desire to delve, delve, and expand your understanding of all of the potential possibilities of what it is that you could believe in order to intuit your way through that and pick up the pieces here and there that ultimately serve to assure you by the end of this transit that you do deeply know a lot of what you believe and you're able to work from that heightened sense of intuition, that heightened sense of faith, that heightened sense of conviction in your beliefs. So let's go through this, what I've written here. I write this as a bit of a backstop for me just in case I've forgotten anything and I'm seeing some things already. So, yeah, Neptune in your ninth house inspires a quest for meaning. And what's cool about this is I was alluding to it, but I didn't say these exact words. And this is a word that I would recommend that you kind of keep in your back pocket here of what Neptune is doing for you. So I tend to like to look at Neptune as something that provides a ton of side quests, is how I refer to it. So in video games, you have the ultimate goal of the game, and then you have these side quests. And often what they are there for is for you to pick up items or acquaintances or connections or a bit of information or something that ultimately serves the greater goal and helps you to get there not only faster, but better with a greater sense of standing than you would have if you had not gone on that side quest. So, what's interesting is the ninth house is also the house of questing. It is when you go to a foreign country, you learn their language, you learn their customs, you learn their culture, and not only do you better understand the world and probably spirituality if they are significantly enough culturally different from where you came from, but they also then help you to understand, you know, obviously them and their language and but also your culture and your language and your people better and the intricacies of the, spiritual or cultural underpinnings of where you come from. But it also helps you to understand yourself better. So it's a quest of self that you ultimately go on through the ninth house and with Neptune. So I definitely want to recommend putting that word in your pocket of this is ultimately about a quest for you. So, whether through travel, education, or spiritual exploration, you may feel drawn to explore new cultures, beliefs, or creative pursuits, especially when it comes to personal growth through your own expression of your beliefs. But there is also a risk of becoming overly idealistic or dogmatic about your beliefs. And becoming overly idealistic about your beliefs is usually what leads to a sense of dogmatism. So do try to always hold space for other people to disagree with you and still be good people. So this transit encourages you to expand your horizons and connect with a higher purpose, but it's important to remain open-minded and discerning. Yes. Be cautious of unrealistic expectations or escapism through excessive travel or intellectual pursuits. This can totally be the kind of a thing where you will finish a degree and be ready to get out into the workforce and then kind of procrastinate that by trying for an additional degree. So do think that through if that is something that you wind up doing. Ask yourself, is this a form of escapism? Am I avoiding something by doing this? Or do I really genuinely want this? So this is a time for spiritual growth and broadening your perspective fundamentally and massively. So yeah, this is a really, really wonderful place to have Neptune in these coming years. I will say that in the beginning, in the first few years until 2028, you will also have Saturn in this area, and that is going to be adding a lot of structure and effort to this. I will deal with that in a future video where I will take the conjunction of Saturn and Neptune through the signs. I will address that in a different video, but suffice it to say that there's a little bit extra that you're experiencing until 2028. So that is something to keep in mind. But yeah, I hope it is an absolutely beautiful time for you. And yeah, thank you so much for being here, Leo Rising. Okay, so for Virgo rising, we have Neptune in your eighth house. And this is bringing up matters of a new path or a new journey when it comes to intimate relationships, when it comes to shared resources, other people's resources, your deep connections with other people, as well as power dynamics. So this is going to be introducing new ideas around how it is that you do intimate relationships. So it's also bringing up questions around what is yet to manifest in your relationship. So what is the direction in which you want to commit to others? What is the direction in which you want your deep connections to develop, and seeing that through on a relatively kind of wandering new path that you're on during this period of time. So there's a dream, a wish, a kind of vision that you have for relationships, for your connections with others, for these questions of dependencies, be they emotional or material, and wanting to work together in your connections, your close connections with others toward common goals, and to develop resources with others that is yet to manifest, which you are being drawn toward throughout this period of time. You're being drawn toward these things for the sake of personal growth and development, for the sake of realigning you with the people who are willing to do relationships in the way that feels correct for you as well. So I would expect a lot of synchronicities when it comes to those close relationships of yours, being introduced to people, ideas, even like books and things that introduce to you concepts of how to better develop relationships so that they are on a more even footing and that you and your partner or close friends feel fulfilled through those relationships in a more holistic and robust way. One thing that can come up with Neptune is feeling like you don't have all of the answers. So it can feel like you don't fully understand your relationships. This does open the door to a bit of deception and potential running into manipulations and things like this that you might not be completely aware of right away. So this is something that you'll then wind up having to learn through the process of what Neptune is doing in this house. And it is ultimately trying to teach you about these questions of boundaries and dependencies and things like this through this period of time, but it will pull you in different directions. It may introduce you to situations where that becomes a bit of an issue in order to do so, just because that's how it winds up teaching you these things. I would say it would be wonderful if you can start this process off by doing a little bit of extra research into the psychological and behavioral manifestations of power dynamics within relationships so that you are as prepared as possible and that you are enabling the expression of this transit to come through in a way that is more under your control, that isn't just being introduced to you through, okay, well, I didn't realize that people did these kinds of things, and now I do because I experienced it. Sometimes you can hedge these things off by learning about them ahead of time. So, yeah, you will really, really, really need to follow your intuition, your instincts, your sense of faith in yourself and in others in order to understand when it is that you should trust, when it is that you should pull back, when it is that you should go all in. And that's ultimately going to be a lot of the lessons around this upcoming period of time for you, Virgo rising. So let's look through what I have written here. I write these things to make sure I don't forget anything. So, yeah, Neptune in your eighth house brings a dreamy, transformative energy to your relationships and shared resources. You may feel drawn to explore deeper emotional or spiritual connections. This can also have you tapping into that which is beyond the veil, so to say. So, getting into more esoteric spirituality or esoteric sciences, so to say, and delving really deep into that, not just in terms of research, but in terms of feeling like your spirit is really infused into those topics as well. So there is a risk of confusion or deception in matters of intimacy, finances, or power dynamics, especially when it comes to questions of dependency. So that's a word that I would highlight for sure to pay attention to where you have dependencies, people dependent on you or you dependent on others, just to be aware of it if there's something that winds up coming up for you. So, yes, we have this transit can dissolve old patterns in your relationships. This is ultimately what it's working on. This is ultimately what it's trying to do when it comes to matters of relationships is it's it's trying to get you into a better and healthier pattern when it comes to how you relate with others and how you build your life with other people in a very intimate and interconnected way so that it works out better for you and for others involved. So there can be that you are led to deeper understanding of trust and vulnerability, but do definitely be cautious of idealizing others, especially those very close to you. So try not to assume, oh, this person would never do this. thing that they're clearly doing because this is a wonderful person who understands things better than I do. Really, really, really watch out for being gaslighted by others and for gaslighting yourself with regard to others. Also, don't ignore red flags for sure. And I would, if you don't fully feel like you understand all of that, I would go deep into researching it because this is also a place of research. So if you can dig into that, that would be excellent and set you up in a really wonderful way for this transit. This is a time for spiritual and emotional transformation, but it's important to stay grounded and maintain clear boundaries. And yeah, I think that that is pretty much what I need to say about this transit. We will also be dealing with, for the first few years, Saturn also in this area. And so there can be a bit of a push and pull between rigidity and dissolving of matters when it comes to your close relationships in the first few years of this, but we'll get into that more in a future video where I take the Saturn Neptune conjunction through the houses, as we will actually be dealing for a few years with both of these in the same place. So yeah, that is what I have for you, Virgo rising. I hope you have an absolutely beautiful time with Neptune in this house, and thank you so much for being here. So for Libra rising, we have Neptune moving into your seventh house. And so Neptune brings up matters of the path that you're on, the kind of journey of life that you are on. And for you, this is impacting your relationship. So going on a kind of relational journey in these coming 14 years to better understand ultimately how it is that you want to do relationships and how it is that you want to connect to people. So this also brings up questions of what is yet manifest. So the types of relationships, the types of connections that you're deeply yearning for, this can have you become more and more and more clear about that, but through a bit of a wandering path, through a bit of having breadcrumbs laid upon your path for you to connect you to different types of people to kind of explore and expand your horizons when it comes to those connections. And there's with Neptune a dream, a wish, a hope, a vision that becomes apparent to you that is quite broad and it can be very romanticized. So while you'll want to stay as grounded as you can throughout this time, there are visions that are being introduced to you about how it is that you would genuinely be fulfilled through relationships going forward. And so I would try not to miss that broader message that is being brought to you as well. And you may feel that you are being drawn down paths of personal growth and realignment through your relationship. So this can even have you better understanding yourself through the connections that you are developing, like that you meet someone who teaches you a lot, like in that kind of a direct way, as a Neptune that is being even introduced to you via other people through the seventh house there. One thing that is always interesting about Neptune transits is that it can become quite apparent that you do not have all of the answers in a certain area of your life. So there can be then, when it comes to relationships, you may have some vague idea of how you would like to feel in a relationship, but you may feel like you don't quite know what type of a person would bring these things to you. And so this can have you better and better understanding that. And it will be important with Neptune in this house to allow yourself to be led by intuition and faith when it comes to who it is that you're being connected to. There's also likely to be a huge amount of synchronicity that you wind up experiencing in who you connect to in the coming 14 years or so. So you may find that you keep running into the same person that you don't quite know yet, that your path keeps being realigned with someone. And it's likely that that person just has something really important to teach you, either about how you do relationships or about yourself. So I would remain open to those things and to try not to, if you do run into deception and things like that, to not become completely disillusioned or to completely lose trust, because that's not ultimately what Neptune is trying to do here. It's just trying to introduce new flavors and a more holistic vision of what it is that relationships can offer for you and what it is that you can offer for other people too. So let's go through what I have written here. So we have Neptune in your seventh house brings idealism and confusion to your relationships. You may feel drawn to romantic, creative, or spiritually aligned partners. That is something that you may well find, is that you'll also be being introduced to Neptunian types of people, which is to say spiritual people or creative or artistic people or very highly compassionate people. However, potentially also people who need help or people who are a little bit helpless slash hopeless in that they're willing to deceive themselves and potentially others in order to avoid dealing with some of their issues. So these are things that you'll definitely want to keep in mind. So there is a risk of unrealistic expectations or unclear boundaries. That is another thing that Neptune is likely going to be teaching you about a lot, is how to be vulnerable, have trust, and yet maintain healthy boundaries within your relationships. That's that kind of holistic vision that it's trying to bring to you. It's not just, oh, I would love to have a partner that meets all of these physical descriptions and they have this kind of a job. It's like, okay, well, that leaves you open to a lot of not so great people that will not fulfill you in all of these other ways. So understanding more holistically the types of people that you want to be connecting to and why. It's also important to avoid codependency or losing yourself in a partner. That's another thing, is that this can have you feeling almost like you are dissolving into someone else's life. So that's something to keep your eye open for. So avoid idealizing others for sure, putting anyone on a pedestal or ignoring red flags. It's going to be very, very important to pay attention for red flags throughout this time. This is a time for exploring the spiritual dimensions of relationships, but it's also important to stay grounded and maintain a sense of self. That's going to be very paramount, to try to continually check in and make sure that you do know, where you end and others begin, because if that is difficult to understand, that can indicate not exclusively potential red flags of someone else, but that can point to potential codependent patterns of your own that you can then better understand and work with in a healthier way. And it can also then make clear to you ultimately what your highest priorities are and ultimately what it is truly that you're looking for in a relationship and in your connections with other people, generally speaking. So yeah, I think that is pretty much what I have for you, Libra rising. I hope that this transit is really wonderful for you, and thank you so much for being here. So for Scorpio rising, we have Neptune in your sixth house. And so this is bringing you along a new and interesting kind of path or journey of life through your routines, through questions of how it is that you do things and the rhythm with which you do things and the health and holistic nature of how it is that you routinize your life. And so it's bringing a lot of spirituality and creativity to that area, but it can also dissolve certain structures along those lines. So you may wind up finding that it's a little bit difficult to maintain a solid routine. And I hate to say, there's an extent to which you'll need to kind of go with the flow on this, and you will need to be as flexible as you possibly can with your routines, while also trying not to let that completely get out of hand. it's a bit of a frustrating need to balance and push and pull with yourself a bit. But Neptune here isn't in the most natural space, but it is in a space that it can do a lot to alleviate some of the frustrations from, because sometimes we can get into routines or patterns of our daily life that are not ultimately very fulfilling. And that's what Neptune's trying to bring to this area of your life, is a sense of fulfillment and infusing some magic into your day-to-day life as well. So this also brings up questions of what is yet to manifest. So I would say, even if you have struggled with routine in the past, this can actually have you understanding that the ways that you've been trying to do it may be based on what works for other people. That may not be what is best for you. And to have Neptune here can open your perspective along those lines, such that you're finally able to develop something which is actually flexible enough for you to be able to maintain sustainably and then be able to rely on in time. There's also then a sense of a dream or a wish or a vision that comes through with Neptune. And I would expect for this to come through for you in the sense of the feeling of your day-to-day life. So, for instance, this is something that advertising tries to work on in us a lot, which is to sell us a feeling of a life through their products or whatnot. It's what we look at or tend to look at in magazines, is these kinds of idealized, almost sentiments of what life should be in an idealized state. And Neptune is going to be introducing that to you as something that you are seeking. And it's not fruitless. It's not that this is just wishy-washy or fantastical or impractical or irresponsible or anything along those lines. How is it that you want your home to be? How is it that you want your working space to be? Do you want to create in your routine some room for things that feel a little bit more idealized, like going to a specific bistro that you really like and that being a regular part of your routine, or going to the lake every once in a while, or going on trips here and there, and to infuse your routine with that so that you are making your day-to-day life feel a lot more tapped in and tuned into your sense of not just life as in the day to day, but life as in truly living life and truly experiencing life, and bringing that more into your regularly scheduled programming, shall we say. So you may feel that you are drawn down paths of growth or personal development or realignment. And this could be through different types of activities or different ways of doing your day, that you may feel drawn in this way or that. And ultimately, what it's trying to teach you is the flexibility that you can have in this area of your life, even in your working day. The kind of flexibility that you can introduce to that to make it feel a lot more comfortable and a lot more fulfilling and a lot more aligned with how it is that you want for your spirit to feel throughout your day to day. So one thing with Neptune that can be a little bit frustrating is that often it can feel like you don't have all the answers. And of course, we don't ever really have all of the answers, but it is really necessary with Neptune to be led by intuition and to be led by faith. So, for one thing, faith in Neptune, in that it's trying to do something really wonderful and beautiful for you, and to not get frustrated with the fact that it doesn't work in these tangible kinds of ways that the sixth house typically demands. So, on a couple of fronts here. If you feel like there's something coming up with your health, I would trust your gut and your instincts, unless you know that you're a bit of a hypochondriac, in which case you're going to need to find another way. I don't know. I don't really have an answer for that, but probably testing it against a an alternative health practitioner specifically if you feel like you tend to go a little bit overboard along those lines. But one thing with Neptune in the sixth is it can make diagnoses by the book more difficult. And I feel that regular doctors tend to be going more and more and more by the book. And so having Neptune here can make it a little bit more difficult to get a correct diagnosis, at least on the first go. So trust your intuition, trust your instincts. And if you feel like something is a bit awry, I would at least get a second opinion if you are not satisfied with the answer of a given practitioner. And also, I would recommend, if you are open to it at all, to inquire with some alternative health practitioners as well, because they tend to do a little bit better with the types of subtle energies through which Neptune tends to work. They'll probably be able to nail something down a little bit easier than a standard doctor would. Additionally, one thing that I would watch out for is that you are very likely to be highly environmentally sensitive throughout this time as well. So that is something that you'll want to keep in mind if you start to have weird symptoms. It might not be, so to say, like an illness or like a huge health problem. It could be that you've developed a sensitivity or an allergy, something along these lines. And so I would try to isolate that if you possibly can and try to work that out of your system. Additionally, I would see that stress is something that you may also really want to avoid because you'll be a little bit more sensitive to that as well. Additionally, like aggression, things like that, that can take place in the working environment. I would try to avoid things like that. Just basically try to be a lot more sensitive to yourself and try not to brush off as irrelevant or as frivolous the needs of your spirit or what it is that your intuition is telling you that your body is needing or is not wanting around this whole transit as well. So, with all of that said, let's look through some of what I have written here, make sure I haven't forgotten much. Neptune in your sixth house brings a dreamy, idealistic energy to your work and daily routines. You may feel drawn to a more compassionate, creative, or spiritually aligned job. That's also not frivolous. This is the way that Neptune leads us. If something feels aligned, I would not ignore it. Or if something doesn't feel aligned, I would not necessarily ignore that either. There's also a risk of confusion or neglect of practical responsibilities. That's also where maintaining a routine can be a little bit difficult. This transit encourages you to integrate your spiritual values into your daily life, as well as creativity, art, music, anything that lightens your spirit. Yeah, that's pretty much that. But it's important to stay grounded and avoid escapism. Yeah, try also, this can have you procrastinating for sure. So try to be at least a bit aware of that. If you are procrastinating, try and figure out if there's a way to like magic up your routine a bit so that it doesn't feel as boring or daunting, whatever it is that you are avoiding. Pay attention to your physical and mental well-being, as Neptune can sometimes cloud issues related to health. This is a time for finding meaning in your work and daily habits, but it's important to maintain balance and clarity. So, yeah. That I think is pretty much what I have for you, Scorpio rising. I hope that this transit is wonderful for you and does magic up your routine a bit. And yeah, other than that, thank you so much for being here. Okay, so for Sagittarius rising, we have Neptune in your fifth house, and Neptune brings up matters of a new path or a new journey in life. And for you, this is taking place in the house of your creativity, children, your sense of spirit and creative expression, as well as things that you like, your hobbies and interests and things along these lines. That which kind of lights you up is in this house. And so you're being drawn along a new kind of wandering path in this period of time with Neptune moving into this house. It's a very lovely, lovely, lovely house for it to be in because one of the things that Neptune introduces to us is a lot of inspiration. And to have inspiration in this very creative house is absolutely wonderful. It's basically like you have a muse wandering through the place of your creativity. So if you are a creative type, this is to be absolutely welcomed. And what Neptune also tends to bring up is what is yet to manifest. So what is it that you are wanting to create out in the world? There may be things that you are completely unaware of yet that it is that you're wanting to create for yourself. And Neptune is going to be introducing you to a lot of those things. And additionally, with Neptune, we deal with what is a dream, a wish, or a vision that we have for ourselves. So the enjoyment, the spirit, the creativity, the fulfillment, the personal and creative expression that you are desiring to experience in your life. Neptune is leading you toward more and more paths through which you can do that. If you have children, this is also lighting up and softening your relationship with them. It can be dissolving some boundaries either between you and them or for them. So that's something that you'll want to keep an eye on and make sure that everything is always clean and clear, especially for them and also for you. But ultimately, this is a really wonderful and idealistic kind of uh, romanticization in the purest sense of those kinds of relationships. This can also be an area, the fifth house of romantic relationships and romance in general. And so you may also find that you are feeling a lot more almost classically romantic. Like you may find that if you haven't been the biggest fan of roses and things like this, that you're drawn now to these things so much more, like ballads and emotionally kind of evocative music and films and things like this. So you may find that you are much more emotionally invested in creative works, whether they be your own or through the appreciation of those works. I would certainly expect that you're going to be really tapping into and enjoying the heck out of different forms of media, but especially music and film and art in this period of time. Now, this can also have you feeling like you're being drawn down different paths. One of the ways that I like to speak of Neptune is that it likes to draw us onto side quests. And you may feel that that is something that you're experiencing creatively. If you are already a creative type, or even if you're not feeling drawn to certain mediums, that ultimately you probably won't necessarily land on the first one of them and stick with that, but somehow that medium and your experience with it will then inform your experience and your development of another medium or even a completely different area of your life that you were hoping to inject a greater sense of your own personal expression through. And you may experience something with a certain creative medium that's then helping to infuse or introduce you to that energy in order to uh, manifest that or say infuse that into even another area of your life as well. Now, this is ultimately meant to lead you toward greater growth and realignment of yourself and your spirit. So you are being creatively realigned. Another thing that tends to come up with Neptune is the sense of not having all of the answers. And so that's something that you'll need to be open to during this time is that you might not be fully aware off the bat when Neptune moves into this house of even what all is it that you like. And it's through the journey of this. So, for instance, if someone were to come to you and say, let me think of a specific example. What is your favorite type of cuisine? What do you love? And you may have some standard answers, but you may then be kind of introduced to the idea, Well, I don't necessarily know because maybe I haven't explored all of these different types of things. And so that can set you on a path of pursuing that almost as a hobby or an interest of trying different types of cuisines and learning more about, I don't know anything about cooking really, but different ways of doing things. And then it can lead you to a more intricate and detailed and subtle understanding of what it is that you like and maybe what it is that you don't so much like. But it's through being led down these different paths of just trying things out and being very open around all of that. So it is very important with Neptune to always allow yourself to be led by intuition and by faith. So that is going to be really important for you with your creativity, with your expression, with what it is that you like or don't like. Follow your instincts and your intuition and try not to let other people and their views of things be imposed upon you, as that's likely to then bring in some of the disillusioning or kind of weirder angles of Neptune that we can sometimes encounter. Also, when it comes to your children, it'll be very important for you to follow your instincts, your intuition with them. Try to be as flexible with them as possible. Try not to build up too many walls, but they may be going through a sense of not feeling like they really understand themselves through this time. And so through your compassion, you can help them through that as well. They're probably trying to get their footing, trying to better understand life, their place in the world, and so on and so forth, what they're able to do and what they would like to do as well. So yeah, those are some ideas. Let's run through this, what I have written here, just in case I forgot anything. Neptune in your fifth house enhances your creativity and romantic idealism. And again, romanticizing, not just in the sense of like a romantic relationship, but romanticization of life, even generally speaking. You may feel inspired to pursue artistic or spiritual projects, but there's also a risk of unrealistic expectations in love or creative endeavors. Try not to put people on pedestals. They then are inevitably going to disappoint you. That's just kind of unfortunately a fact of life. And try to make your expectations as clear as possible, as well as what it is that you like. And when you don't like something, try to be very clear about that as well. This transit encourages you to connect with your inner child and express yourself authentically, without a doubt. But it's important to stay grounded and avoid escapism through romance or creative pursuits. So this can have you definitely backburnering on occasion some more practical concerns out of a joy or a love for a creative pursuit, but do try and make sure that you're not also utilizing escapism through that. Neptune can be escapist, and when it's in the fifth, it can utilize those topics in order to allow you to escape certain things that maybe you shouldn't always. So be cautious of idealizing partners or projects, as this can lead to disappointment. And this is a time for exploring the spiritual dimensions of creativity and love, but it's important to maintain a sense of reality. So yeah, I think that is pretty much what I have for you, Sagittarius rising. I hope that it is a beautiful and magical time for you and that you are filled with the muse during this time. But yeah, thank you so much for being here, Sagittarius rising. All right, so for Capricorn rising, we have Neptune in your fourth house, and Neptune introduces us to a new path, a new sense of a journey in life. And with that path leading through the fourth house, this has to do with your sense of roots, your sense of family, and your own personal core and foundation. So this is going to be a deeply personal transit for you, and it's going to be working through a lot of that material. And it does encourage you to be very open along those terms to new ideas or new perspectives of these things. So you're likely to increasingly understand yourself, your roots, your family, and possibly even patterns along those lines that you have experienced. For instance, if you had any interesting dynamics in your family relationships, this can have you increasingly working through that compassionately with yourself in order to better understand it and be able to soften some of that so that maybe it's not as heavy. Or if there are any family patterns, you might not even be aware of them quite yet. Neptune tends to introduce us to things that we weren't really aware of beforehand. And there can be a very fascinating journey that you feel like you're going through of self-discovery and discovery of your roots and the patterns there and what impact those have on what it is that you feel like you're here to do in this life. Neptune can also bring up to us what is yet to manifest. So, this can, if you don't already have a family, this can have you starting to yearn for a family or a sense of family that maybe you haven't experienced before. And it can have that vision increasingly through leading you on different paths that may or may not be fully satisfactory, but at least introduce you to more ideas of what you would like for a family life to look like or a foundation to look like for you. And it can have you better and better approximating something that is much more fulfilling than. With Neptune, we're also dealing with a dream, a wish, a vision for our lives. And so for you, this is a matter of a dream, a wish, a vision of what family is to you and what your foundation is to you, what it is that your origin narrative is. That is going to be something that you'll be engaging with throughout this period of time as well. Is what is it? Maybe do you even want to intentionally reimagine your sense of your origin narrative? If you have a lot of beliefs about yourself of, oh, well, in school I wasn't very popular, and so therefore I have low self-esteem, and so therefore I don't really feel like I'm able to accomplish as much as I would if that hadn't happened. Do you want to completely, if you want to make up a story, if you want to just redesign that whole story and all of the meaning of that for you, Neptune is more than willing to help you with that kind of a reimagining of things. Whatever it is that ultimately leads you to a greater sense of fulfillment. And for some of us, that does mean that we need to re-narrativize what it is that we've gone through and what it is that means for us. So for instance, we can look back then on not being very popular in school or something like this as having been very unique and having been, outside of the realm of those around us and offering ourselves a sense of our own authenticity through that kind of a narrative rather than creating it as something of a victim narrative. Now, one thing that you will want to watch out for is something along those lines. Neptune can have us feeling a little bit victimized, and it has to do with narratives. And this is speaking to your roots. So I would be especially cautious of creating any stories about where you come from or being introduced by Neptune to any stories about maybe things that you've even put on yourself, to find little crafty ways to say, blame others for that and kind of let yourself off the hook in that way. It's something to keep in mind. Neptune, ultimately, what it can offer you that is best is a wonderful narrative that genuinely is authentic, but doesn't make you feel lesser than, that does build you up, that builds up your sense of self and the sense of the magic of your own authenticity, the sense of the spirit that infuses you as an individual and how it is that you're able to experience that and express that through your life as well. So you may feel that you are drawn down different interesting paths of growth and realignment, especially when it comes to family. So you may have family members come in and out of your life in terms of their like day-to-day involvement. And you may have some family members do some things that are confusing or mysterious suddenly drop off, like I said, suddenly reappear. And ultimately, this is coming in at different times when you're dealing with your own narrative, when you're dealing with any other aspects of your family, to introduce new layers of that story to make it more thorough, more holistic, and more authentic of what it is that you ultimately understand about your family and how it is that you can realign potentially with your family, whether that be through blood family or through creating a family in your inner circle that is there to offer you a sense of security and rootedness in the world, because that's ultimately what family is meant to be. So, one thing that can be quite clear with a Neptune transit is that we don't have all of the answers. And you'll certainly be experiencing that along the lines of family. For instance, if you're doing ancestry work, I wouldn't recommend against it, but there can be a sense of running into a lot of question marks. And these may then need to be things that you then need to explore other avenues of finding out. So maybe it would be going to a country of origin, which would also be another Neptune theme of the fourth house of, re-journeying back along the lines that maybe your ancestors journeyed forward to in the first place in order to better understand and better delve into that story of your origin and make it more real and make it better understood and more holistic and complete for you. But it's going to be very important when you're dealing with your family, when you're dealing with questions of your home and where you belong and your foundation, to follow your intuition, to follow your instincts along these lines. Try for sure one little thing to keep in mind, try for sure not to allow yourself to be gaslighted by family or to do so to them either. So let's go through some of what I have written here and make sure that I didn't overlook anything that I wanted to mention. So Neptune in your fourth house brings a dreamy, idealistic energy to your home and family life. You may feel drawn to create a more spiritual or peaceful home environment. That is one thing that I definitely meant to mention. You may find that you are redesigning and reorienting your living environment in order to better align with you as well, to infuse a little bit of magic into your living environment. You may find that you're also wanting to make a major move, possibly even overseas or to somewhere that feels exotic and interesting and exciting and make a home there. You may feel drawn along those lines. So, more spiritual or peaceful home environment, but there's also a risk of confusion or unclear boundaries with family members. This transit can dissolve old patterns in your family dynamics, leading to a deeper understanding of emotional security and belonging. However, be cautious of escapism or neglecting practical responsibilities at home. Yeah, this can have you also in a bit of a dream state at times in your home. So, if that happens, I would possibly try and shake that out by getting out a little bit or by trying to establish a little bit firmer of boundaries if that comes up as an issue with yourself in your home and what it is that you're allowed to do there and for how long, things like this. This is a time for exploring the spiritual dimensions of family and home life, but it's important to stay grounded and maintain clear boundaries for sure. There may also be a family member that arises needing something. I'm not sure if I mentioned that. And it will be up to you to follow your intuition as to whether or not you should indulge that. And I do use that word a bit pointedly. That may be something that winds up coming up is that there's a family member that is needy, that desires to be indulged, and you may wind up then having to learn a lesson about doing that kind of a thing, through this experience with your family member. So is that something you want to do? I would not say that you should say no to everyone. I would say you should follow your intuition and your instincts on that. If you feel like something's going to become unhealthily dependent, then potentially you might want to avoid that. So, yeah. think that is pretty much what I have for you, Capricorn rising. I hope that this transit is really wonderful for you. You will also have Saturn in this house for the first few years of this transit, but we'll address that and the kind of complexities that that adds to all of this in a future video when I look at the Saturn Neptune conjunction through the houses very shortly, too. But yeah, thank you so much for being here, Capricorn. Okay, so for Aquarius rising, we have Neptune in your third house, and Neptune introduces to us a new path, a new kind of journey of life. And for you, this is introducing this to you through your third house of communication and learning the people, places, and things that are around you, your locality, your community. This can also imply siblings and peers and people like this, acquaintances, the the world around you, even in the sense of like going to the grocery store, going to the bookstore, just this kind of day to day, the things that are around you and that you are interacting with. So, there will, without a doubt, be experiences that you have that are quite lovely, I think, where you are introduced to bits and pieces of information that are extraordinarily beneficial to you that you may feel like you are being drawn toward a certain learning path and then find, no, not quite. I'm going to be winding up going into something else. And then you kind of weave your way through various different topics or fields or authors or whatnot. And what's great about this, you're not at all wasting your time. You're picking up little pieces of the puzzle of what it is that Neptune is ultimately trying to show you through this broader 14-year transit here. It's trying to teach you something in your third house. And ultimately, what it's trying to teach you about is the people, places, and things around you and the way that you interact with those things. So, Neptune also brings to our attention what is yet to manifest. So it can be this kind of dream or vision or wish that we have that we may not even be fully aware that we have, that is introduced to us and that we wind up pursuing. So you may find that there are certain topics, maybe even a language that you either have long wanted to learn or that you didn't even know yet that you would really love to learn, that's going to be introduced to you as something that you wind up pursuing throughout this period of time. Now, a perfect example of a Neptune in the third house kind of a thing would be, oh, I'm going to learn Spanish and I'm going to go and live in Bolivia, and that's the plan. And ultimately, this could lead you to learn Spanish and become a translator and get you out of a field that you were already working in or something along those lines. And maybe you wind up in Spain instead of Bolivia. It can lead you in these different directions. Ultimately, it was trying to get you to Spain. It was trying to maybe get you out of that field you were working in, but it had to introduce you to a fascination with Bolivia in order to get that ball rolling. So that's the kind of interesting wandering path that it can lead you down, but none of it is wasted. It's ultimately building up to something that Neptune has basically in mind for you that's really beautiful, but it's much more broad and it's much more intricate than it could possibly somehow explain to you. And so it leads you through your intuition, down these different kinds of paths to pick up these various puzzle pieces to eventually put together this bigger picture that it's having you work on. So this can have you feel like, again, you're drawn down these different paths. And the purpose of this is for the sake of your own personal growth, as well as a realignment of your life. And so it's trying to realign your day-to-day life and your experience of that, as well as the information that you have at your disposal and the way that you communicate, with whom you communicate, and so on and so forth. One thing that becomes quite apparent with a Neptune transit is that you don't have all of the answers. And so often it will introduce you to things that you have to learn, even if it's not in the third house. But the third house has to do with learning. So that is absolutely going to be the case for you. But feeling like you don't have all of the answers, and what can be frustrating about that is, of course, the cultures that we live in today, they do tend to exalt a sense of having answers, knowing what is the practical response to a given thing? What is the practical plan? Neptune doesn't really work along those lines. It works along the lines and leads along the lines of intuition and faith and a kind of inner knowing or nudging. And so it's through understanding that you don't have all the answers that you're able to pick up on the information that you need in order to have a much more complete understanding of the answers that are ultimately going to be serving you in your own life and bringing, like I said, a lot of magic to the people, places, and things around you, and infusing that with a sense of spirit throughout this period of time. So with all of that said, let's look at some of what I have written here for you and make sure I didn't forget anything that I wanted to mention. So, Neptune in your third house brings a dreamy, idealistic energy to your communication and learning. You may feel inspired to explore creative or spiritual topics, but there's also a risk of confusion or unclear information. One thing that you'll probably find a little bit straightforwardly annoying in this 14 years coming up is miscommunications. Neptune is not the best at straightforward, here's the facts, I'm just going to lay it out for you, and you're going to understand it perfectly clearly. I would also think that you will experience some interesting things with technology. This can have weird, mysterious problems arising. So if that comes up and it's not a Mercury retrograde, I would probably chalk it up to the fact that you have Neptune in your third doing weird and interesting things to your technology. This transit encourages you to, and I have to say, that the way that Neptune works, I also wouldn't put it past this kind of a thing to be like, yeah, and so you missed a text that you definitely did not want to be reading, or this could be a matter of, well, there was an excellent deal on a laptop. And so, because you weren't in the market for a laptop, you would have missed it if I hadn't messed up yours in a way that you don't understand, kind of a thing. It usually works out for the best, but it can be pretty annoying. So, this transit encourages you to connect with your local community and share your ideas. This can also have you feeling like you want to contribute to your community, especially to anyone who is in need around you. So, that is something, if it comes up as an urge, this would absolutely encourage you to do something like that. And to also share your ideas. It's important to stay grounded and avoid misunderstandings. Be cautious of idealizing people around you, people, places, or things around you, environments around you. One thing that you'll need to keep in mind is that Neptune in this place of the third house, it does sensitize you to the places it is. And in the third house, the places it is the places around you. So this can have you really sensitive to your environment, either physically in terms of like your health or energetically, emotionally, spiritually, even in terms of your feelings. Like you may feel even more like easily offended by certain kinds of communications and things like this. So that is something to definitely keep in mind, is to try and go easy on yourself a bit, to avoid overstimulating Neptune in this area, because that's another way that it can kind of go a bit sideways. Yeah, be cautious of idealizing people, as this can lead to disappointment. This is a time for exploring the spiritual dimensions of communication and learning, also of community. But it's important to remain discerning and clear, especially about your objectives. I think expectations, objectives, your day-to-day life, trying to the extent that you can, be open to what Neptune is trying to infuse into that area without letting this become completely boundaryless or completely structureless. So, as long as you're not letting Neptune go to extremes in this area, it should be pretty good and pretty beautiful and wonderful, especially anything that captures your interest in terms of something to learn more about. I would go with it because Neptune is working in this area. And it's a way, because this is a place of mind and Neptune works on these abstract matters, this is a wonderful way to allow Neptune to not be something you necessarily need to meditate on all the time or devote a bunch of time to, but it enables it to basically meet you where you are in your day-to-day life and to infuse a lot of its broader, more spiritual dimensions into that part of your life to make it more to make it feel more complete, more holistic, more fulfilling and inspiring to go through your day to day. So, yeah, that is what I have for you, Aquarius rising. I hope that this transit is absolutely wonderful for you. And thank you so much for being here. So, last but not least, we have Pisces rising. So, we have Neptune in your second house, and Neptune tends to lead us on new paths and new kind of journeys of life. And it's doing this for you through your second house of finances and security and values. And so you may find that you are drawn toward a more spiritually oriented, spiritually aligned, or at least a more authentically aligned means of earning your income or even of investing your income, things like this. So it is through questions of material things like this that you are being introduced to more spiritual themes, which is pretty fascinating. It's an interesting place to have Neptune. It can also bring to your awareness what has yet to manifest. So it tends to approach us as a kind of dream or vision or a wish that we have. And so this can have you thinking really big in terms of what it is that you want to create for yourself materially in your life, and yet simultaneously be questioning you as to whether materialism is even something that you really align with. And what is it in terms of your values that these material things can offer? What is the value of money ultimately? And not just in terms of dollars and cents, but in terms of what is it that it's able to accomplish that actually fulfills you? Is it having that sense of security so that you don't need to feel emotionally on edge out of any sort of a fear around your material standing? Is it because you're then able to help others as you see is needed? Is it in order to create a life of independence for you so that you don't need to take orders as much from, say, a boss or something like this? Like, what is the value of money and finance and income for you? Is it to create eventually a life for yourself where you don't need to work so hard for these things? So it's going to be asking you these things and asking you to make dreams and wishes and kind of appeals along these lines. And it can, without a doubt, meet you halfway along those lines. So I would be trying to get really clear with yourself about that and pursue those things, but also see what happens. You're likely to find weird little synchronicities where you're drawn along a weird kind of winding path of growth and of realignment to get you into those places to where you're able to realize that kind of a relationship with money and finance and security and things like this, and self-worth and self-value and so on. So that is really what I would expect for Neptune to be doing for you in the coming 14 years or so. But another thing that we can experience with Neptune is a sense of not having all of the answers. So you may feel a bit up in the air about finances and where they will be coming from. This can be the kind of a thing where, say, if you do go independent, then you are in a very kind of Neptune in the second house position of, okay, I need to make sure then that I keep this income flowing through my own work because you can't always be 100% sure that all of the money is going to be coming in because it's not necessarily a salary or something like this. So there can be a sense of that, but being led by intuition and faith and instinct along the lines of your investments, your income, questions of security, and your material resources and things like this, also your values, making sure that things are aligned with your values is going to be the best way to get the best results, to put you in a position where you have the kind of relationship with these matters that you're ultimately wanting to have. And you don't need to be completely clear on that from the outset. Neptune, basically, probably from my experience, Neptune probably knows what those answers are for you. It's not just going to tell you outright. It's going to lead you to this kind of increased greater and greater and greater understanding through these interesting kind of wandering paths. And it can be a little bit maddening, especially when what it's working through and what it's working on is something that's as important as your finances and your security and things like this. But ultimately, I find that Neptune certainly doesn't wish us harm. And as long as we are not full on deluding ourselves about something or trying to escape the reality of a given situation, it tends to take pretty decent care of us to make sure that the bottom doesn't completely fall out. One thing I will say though is that the one perfect example of a Neptune in the second house gone awry transit would be ignoring the fact that you know that a company is on the wrong track that you're working for and sweeping it under the rug and trying to just work your way out of it on behalf of the company when you know that down the line the layoffs will reach you. And then having to learn that Neptunian lesson of you should have followed your instincts, you should have followed your intuition, try not to utilize escapism, and now you know. And so, avoiding those kinds of things going a bit sideways lessons that we can get out of Neptune sometimes because we're avoiding dealing with something, trying to really truly follow your intuition and truly follow your instincts. Because I will tell you, like, Neptune is such I knew that X, Y, and Z was going to happen. And I somehow convinced myself to not worry about it, kind of a thing. So that is something to keep in mind. You probably already have a bit of a vision of what you want out of this area. I would put that out there. I would basically kind of set that as an initial appeal. I would remain open to the intuitive kind of hits and realignments and weird synchronicities and the information that seems to come to you from nowhere. The possibly even the people that are introduced to you in interesting, weird ways that seem to potentially be able to contribute to maybe going a little bit more independent. We do need to keep in mind this Neptune is in Aries. That specifically is probably something that's going to come up for you, is that you're going to want to have more control over this area of your life. And that's probably going to feed into the broader dream that you have in some way. And whether that be independent as in working for yourself or independent as in not feeling like you're going month to month or year to year or week to week or whatnot with your sense of security. You're going to want to have that much more in your hands than something like that would necessarily provide. And you'll probably be more comfortable with going on a week to week thing if it's you that's running the show, and that you are the business basically that you're receiving income from. Trying to think if there's anything else specific that I need to mention before we go into the rest of this. Maybe something will come to me, but let's go through this and make sure I haven't forgotten anything, because that's why I tend to write these things, is I might otherwise forget something I meant to mention. So Neptune in your second house brings a dreamy, idealistic energy to your finances, values, and self-worth. You may feel drawn to pursue creative or spiritual income sources, but there's also a risk of financial fluctuation. Sorry for that typo. Fluctuation or unrealistic expectations. This is another thing that I meant to mention. Neptune does tend to bring an ebb and flow energy to it. So, if you have a good year, try not to rely on the idea that you may spin up for yourself that next year is going to be even better. When you have a good year, I would say with Neptune in your second house, always plan for a rainy day. Anything you can sock away, do it up because there's going to be ebbs. There's going to be that you know bit of a down curve that it's pretty much inevitable with Neptune here. It's not though remotely that's going to be the trend. Often you can have really wonderful uptrends with Neptune in a specific place, especially if you're following your intuition and your instincts on things. So also avoid unrealistic expectations. Because finances are so important, let me just make sure that I say something about following your instincts and your intuition versus following a kind of exciting thread, because it's through that pie in the sky kind of exciting thread that we follow that we get weird results from Neptune, because then it's like, okay, well, sorry, man, like I got to teach you about what intuition is clearly, because that's not what that was. So if you feel anxious about something, usually that's a sign that what you're dealing with is a level of excitement and not necessarily feeling really right or aligned with something. Just because you're excited doesn't mean that it's right for you. So I would work on being able to tap into that. And it may even be really beneficial to your finances to sooner than later look at some stuff on YouTube or in books or whatever about deciphering between intuition versus, excitement or anxiety or whatnot. Because, again, this is a very important area of life. So this transit encourages you to align your values with your spiritual beliefs. Yes, without a doubt, to have a spiritual or philosophical underpinning that is more broad-based to give you the why of all of your values. It's important to stay grounded and avoid escapism through material possessions. Yes. Try to avoid retail therapy. That's another thing that Neptune can encourage when it's in this house. So, yeah, for sure. Be cautious of idealizing your financial situation or self-worth, as this can lead to disappointment. Again, a good year doesn't always imply that the next year is going to be bigger. Always try to be pretty practical and saving for a rainy day. That specifically, saving for a rainy day, in particular in the first few years here, because from now-ish until 2028, you're also then going to be dealing with Saturn in this house. And I'm going to go much more deeply into that when I take the Saturn-Neptune conjunction in Aries through the houses. So we'll get into that more later. But I definitely want to mention here that when it comes to Saturn and Neptune in your second house, one of the things you're going to be rewarded for most is delayed gratification. If you spend a lot with Neptune and Saturn in this house, the idea of that is giving me a little bit of anxiety. That is not the way to go. That will have Saturn kicking your rear while Neptune and Saturn are trying to teach you lessons. And so that can really cause a major dissolving of a foundation under you. So I would say from now through 2028 to not spend beyond your means and to be as practical as you can about your finances as you start to tap more and more into your intuition along these lines as you're preparing for Saturn to move on into your third house and then just having Neptune here. And then you are really rolling with the, okay, relying on the intuition is the way to deal with this. So that said, and that's not meant to scare you, but that is a very real thing that I think is going to be really important for you in the coming years. Because when we have Saturn and Neptune in the same place, it is begging for lessons, and we don't want those along financial lines. So I just want to make sure that you're as well prepared for that as possible. This is a time for exploring the spiritual dimensions of money and values, but it's important to maintain a sense of reality. So, yeah, I think that that is pretty much what I have for you, Pisces rising. I hope that this transit is really wonderful for you. Like I said, this can lead to big, wonderful uptrends. It's great for that to be the case and for us to experience that, but I would not necessarily rely on something like that because that's where things can go a little bit sideways. So, yeah, I hope it treats you wonderfully. And thank you so much for being here. And thank you to everyone for being here so much. I really greatly appreciate it. And if you don't mind hitting the thumbs up button, I greatly appreciate that too. It helps the channel to grow, it helps to spread the video around. And if you are interested in future videos, the Saturn and Neptune through the signs videos will be coming up very soon. And I also cover topics of political and geopolitical, cultural astrology of the world and life as we all experience it together. So if that is something that is of interest to you, then do consider sticking around by subscribing. I would greatly appreciate that as well. And thank you so much, especially to our members here, Angel Niblock, Patrick McKenney, Startlingly True, Deborah Keel-Levitt, Gary A., Stacy Bergener, Maria Cyril Hiro, I think is correct, Cyril Hiro, Michelle Howell, JJ, Jody Z, C. Rezer, Anne Marie, Lynn Newman, and peace out. Much love to you all. Thank you so much for your support, and I will see you all in a future video. Be good. Bye.